I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. What's up, world? Welcome to another edition of I Mix What I Like. iMixWhatILike.org, at I Mix What I Like for all your relevant social media. I'm Jared Ball, happy to be your host. And we have the extended super I Mix What I Like Voices with Vision crew on hand for this powerful conversation we're about to have with our comrade, Dr. Todd Steven Burroughs. I'm a hip-hop gangster and my name is Todd, who is author of the forthcoming comic book biography from Stan Lee to Ta-Nehisi Coates, coming out on Diasporic Africa Press this month. Fellas, welcome. What's up?
Hey, man.
Hey, Netfa. Netfa Freeman, WPFW, Voice of a Vision, Dr. Haight.
2018 is going to be a beautiful year, man.
I'm excited about this collaboration. I don't know, we sat down and person together around the mic and thought about...
Came out to the burbs, to the boondocks, to the little hideaway.
I'm surprised you don't have that big castle,
big castle.
That these, these college professors live in.
Well, Dr. Burroughs, we could talk a little bit about, actually all of us could talk a little bit about, there are levels to this. And there are, as I often joke, it's like the NBA, I might be in the league, but I'm coming deep off that bench.
Right. I don't got that Supermax contract.
Exactly.
Although, some folks like James Peterson just lost their Supermax contract.
They sure did.
Big up to James Peterson.
They sure did. He lost a lot.
I was talking about that.
It's a lot of misogyny in hip-hop.
A lot of misogyny in hip-hop, a lot of misogyny in hip-hop academia.
Yeah, man. Who knew?
A lot of misogyny on that MSNBC. But we were actually talking about that. Not enough people were talking about that. So it's interesting. You said you heard somebody talking about that.
I think it was, I heard it on Dave Zirin's show, but it might have been, it was a passing.
That's a WPFW reference, WPFW.org, Washington, D.C. For those who are not aware, we are all veterans of that space. And anyway, so that's what that was.
Yeah, did we mention that Todd is going to be here?
No, we
Saturday,
didn't. Oh, right. February 17th. So everybody who can come on out, that's Saturday, February 17th from 7 p.m. on at the Regal Cinemas, Majestic 20 and IMAX at Silver Spring, Maryland, for a screening of Black Panther, the film, and a post-screening conversation with us that's going to extend a little bit from here, a little mini version of what we're going to do here. And we'll be joined by the sister Rissa Cat and probably also our dear sister Katia Stitt, who's putting this all together.
Yeah, I kind of...
And probably some others.
I might have a little bit of sour news. I think it's sold out.
It's sold out. So then you won't join us. And you'll catch
sometimes
the after party.
Maybe,
Sometimes you never know. Or then catch us at the after party and then, or just replay the conversation you're about to have today.
Or if we open up another theater for another
theater for another thing. Well, good that it's sold out. PFW is the fundraiser for them. And it'll be a good event and conversation.
Yeah.
And folks get to see Dr. Burroughs live and in person, whereas he's joining us again virtually. For this conversation, but we wanted to be help him get this promotional campaign rolling because we're very excited that one of the crew has again produced something mighty, and we look forward to it. So, Dr. Burroughs, why don't you just give us a quick summary of what it is that we can look forward to? You had a little sneak preview in The Root. We had a sneak preview up at I Mix What I Like. But for those who got those or who missed those, what can we expect coming in this book?
Well, first, I want to thank all of you for the attention that you've given me, and I also want to thank all of you for the assistance you've given me and making me part of the WPFW family. I enjoyed listening to WPFW for many years before I got involved in the I Mix What I Like crew. So first, I just wanted to thank all of you for that. The book is called Marvel's Black Panther, a comic book biography from Stan Lee to Ta-Nehisi Coates. And what I do is I give a textual analysis of most of the major Black Panther stories in the 52 years that the character has existed. And I go into it from the point of view of the writers. So I start with Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, who created the character in 1966. And I go from there all the way through Donald McGregor, and then Christopher Priest, and then Reginald Hudlin, and then Ta-Nehisi Coates, as well as some other writers who were involved in the character. And I compare the white writers and the black writers. And what I found is that the Black Panther is an interesting example of the limits of white liberalism, that the character was created by white liberals, and how the character was portrayed when he was with white liberals is drastically different than how the character was portrayed when Christopher Priest took over the character in 1998. The character may have been called Black Panther, but from 1966 to 1998, he was written solely by whites. Christopher Priest changed that in 1998 when he took over the Black Panther, and Reginald Hudlin took it to the next level, and now we have Ta-Nehisi Coates writing it. So I basically study what the various writers do, and I devote a chapter apiece to what all the Panther writers do.
I do want you to go back. First, I want to ask it this way. I want you to give us a quick summary of a comparison between the white liberal version of the Panther and Coates's version. And Coates's version. So I wanted the book ended. So like, how did he start, and then what did he look like now? And then I also want to have you, if maybe even fold it into this answer, talk a little bit about the context that you're describing there. Why is it that this character and so many others that are now, heroic for many Black people and others around the world, how is it that they all emanated or come out of this white liberal matrix or context?
If I may start with your second question, Dr. Ball, you and I are very.
Hold on, Todd. Hold on. Go ahead.
Dr. Burroughs, this is Cornell West, and I want to thank my dear brother, Dr. Jared Ball, for bringing up the point of discussing the white liberals in comparison to Ta-Nehisi Coates, who would be considered a neoliberal fascist for the white Obama supremacy victory of nothingness with democratic fascism. I just want you to go into how the Black Panther would fit into democratic socialism that brings up the sufferings of Black people, the blues people, because you're from Newark, that Amiri Baraka, we want to hear what the Black Panther would do in New Ark. Would he be a new architect? But thank you, Todd. Go on.
We did forget this.
Well, if you're going to do an impersonation of Cornel West, I'm going to do an impersonation of John Henry Clark. He would say, well, the Black Panther was created by some people who were no strangers to a library, and they were no strangers to newspapers. And what we're talking about is something I know Dr. Ball is familiar with. There's a book called An Empire of Their Own, How the Jews Invented Hollywood. A seminal text that talks about, as Neil Gabler says with great pride, as a Jewish writer for the New York Times, that the Jews created American popular culture. Well, there is a comic book equivalent to that book. It's called Geeks and Gangsters, The Birth of the American Comic Book by Michael Chabon. And he chronicles pretty much the same story that Gabler chronicles, but he chronicles the story of how Jewish immigrants in New York, who all knew each other, who all worked within 5 blocks from each other and played poker every Friday night, created the American superhero. And this started with, of course, Superman, created by some Jewish kids in the Midwest. And the publishing industry was, again, one of these dirty, grubby industries that the WASPs left to the Jews. And so the Jews went and started creating these superhero characters. So the Black Panther is created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, and he's created in 1966. Now, in terms of the first part of what you wanted to know, in terms of the comparison between the beginning and now the current, in the beginning, the Black Panther was this amazing character who took on the entire Fantastic Four and almost beat them, like had them trapped within like 5 minutes. But because the Black Panther Party in the real world had been created, Stan Lee and Roy Thomas watered down the character significantly from its first appearance because he was strong and powerful and Machiavellian and had all these weapons and all of this. And then when the Black Panther Party came out, they started to get scared. And they wanted to start to imitate Sidney Poitier. So when the Black Panther joins the Avengers, he not only keeps his identity as being black a secret. Okay, well, now we're doing some kind of, Invisible Man type stuff here, Ralph Ellison type stuff, or autobiography, ex-colored man type stuff. Not only does he keep his black identity a secret, but he becomes, in his secret identity, a Harlem school teacher. So they de-Africanize him. They depower him. They just completely depower him because in the real world, the Black Panthers had become popular. This was to such an extreme that at one point they even tried to change his name from the Black Panther to the Black Leopard. But that didn't work, thank God.
Well, check this out. That's perfect because, I want to play this segment for us all to respond to where Brother McDuffie, the late, help me out with his first name, Todd.
Sure, Dwayne McDuffie.
Dwayne McDuffie. Brother Dwayne McDuffie has that line in reference to the point you just made where he says the Panther went from invisible to inevitable. And I want to play this clip that features Hudlin and some others, McDuffie and others, talking about the origins of this comic from a documentary called White Scripts and Black Supermen, Black Masculinities in Comic Books. And I want us all to respond to that and add some more to it, because I think what they say here, well, let's just let that go. Let's just let them check it out.
The Black Panther is the equivalent of Captain America. Okay, so wherever Captain America is in the pantheon of superheroes, and I would say he's, first tier, top 5, that's where the Black Panther is. I think, that makes him the most important black superhero.
Initially, obviously, when you first see the Black Panther in '66, and I actually bought that first run. I mean, as a kid, I had all of the Marvel first editions, right? It was empowering. The weird thing is that I don't think I had thought about Africa in '66 at 13. I'm sure I didn't think about Africa at that point. But what I did think about is that this was a black guy, and he was indeed heroic. He defeats the Fantastic Four in the initial run, so that was empowering.
I stumbled across Jungle Action, a comic that featured the Black Panther, and I had an epiphany. I was just fascinated with that comic and read it over and over and over again, and really didn't understand why when I was a kid. Looking back, it was this powerful sense of validation I found in it, seeing myself reflected in the media as a hero. Black Panther was set in a fictional African country that was a technological superpower. And everybody in the book pretty much was black, from the street sweepers to the doctors and the lawyers to the king to the criminals to all of a sudden, it was, 15 pages. I moved from invisible to inevitable.
In his first title series, written by Jack Kirby, his entire adventure during that time is focused on serving these white and wealthy people, and you don't, for the first 7 or 8 issues, you don't even see him in his own country. And I think that's damaging, because as a black superhero, he should be not helping only black people, but he should be helping primarily black people. And they didn't have him doing that. And I think that stems from the writers and the artists of this series.
The Panther, despite his superpowers, represents this kind of, I'm going to call it Negro dignity, right? Because there's dignity in the service of the existing white supremacist state.
One of the reasons the Black Panther is the character that he is, that they wanted to create a character that would be black but not make comic readers in 1966 uncomfortable.
You get the same thing when they did a limited series in the 80s of the Panther, where they build on the struggle in South Africa. And this is probably before the fall of apartheid. And so the Panther guy takes physical manifestation because the violence, the evil of apartheid, right, and that form of exploitation hasn't been dealt with, and principally the Panther has refused to invade and overthrow the white supremacist government, right? And so the Panther guy takes material form and goes into South Africa and just starts slaying white people, right? And so the Panther then challenges his God because he finds the level of brutality and that's not the way to do it. So they find a way to take a middle of the road position, in part arguing that the black South Africans must rise up, but ultimately they must rise up in the correct way.
Well, first of all, I just think it was a bit damaging that the first really blackface to be like blackface at a high level like that as a superhero to be seen was African rather than African American, because these are American writers that are producing this, and they could have chosen to elevate someone within their own country, but they chose to elevate an outside source. And then on top of that, he wasn't even from a real African country; he was from a made-up one, so that it avoids empowering any culture really at all.
He is the exotic African prince, and if somebody like Luke Cage represents one pole of the black superheroes, then the Black Panther is all the way at the other end as this exotic character.
Excessively intelligent, of noble birth. I mean, it was just this kind of, if you were to create a black superhero or being at that period, I think that was kind of like the ideal thing. It was just like, he's of noble birth, he's from Africa, but he's come back to the United States to be an African in America with all this power, all this intelligence, all these resources.
All right, so there's a lot to get into. Todd, you want to go first, or
well, I'll tell you the story I tell.
Go ahead, man.
That limited series was one of the few things I don't deal with because I had to decide what to do my book about. The limited series they mentioned about South Africa, but I want to get into that first. That was one of the few things I did not deal with because I decided to only do the Black Panther when he was starring in his own magazine, with a few exceptions. So it was interesting to hear that analysis of the limited series because, see, I did the other South African story that they did in Black Panther before apartheid ended, which was in a book called Marvel Comics Presents that lasted for like 25 issues, right? There was this long story where the Panther went into South Africa to search for his mother. And he fights, with the Afrikaners. He almost gets necklaced from the, rebellion, in the streets. And because it's written by a white liberal, they try to make both sides equal. And one of the things I point out is that the only equality that Afrikaners share with people who necklace is that they both know they're in a war, right? Panther finds his mother. His mother has been kept as a sexual slave by a white Afrikaner. And that was one of the more powerful stories about Black Panther because that's the first appearance of Black Panther's mother, who is portrayed by Angela Bassett in the movie. So there were a lot of different interpretations there. I'll just say that every decade, the Panther was portrayed in a different way. So again, with Stanley and Jack Kirby, he was this incredible kind of like super version of Patrice Lumumba until the Black Panther Party came out. Then he became this domestic Sidney Poitier type figure. Now, when he was in Jungle Action,
and just real quick, what does Coates do? Did we get that clear?
No, we didn't.
Yeah,
we're gonna get the Coates. Thank you for bringing that up. We're gonna get the Coates.
Let me reframe that.
When he's in Jungle Action.
Todd. Let Dr. West rephrase the question.
I'm sorry. Todd Burroughs from the strong New York City. You know that blues city. Dr. Burroughs, what does it mean then that Ta-Nehisi Coates' first book, The Beautiful Struggle, took time to assassinate the character of his Black Panther father, and then is rewarded with writing the new series on the Black Panther?
Wow.
Fictional character. If he's already assassinated one Black Panther, has he done it to two in his neoliberal stance? Tell me, brother.
Well, Dr. West, he also refers to Morgan State University, my former employer, as 13th grade in that book. He quotes his father. He quotes his father because he tells his father in A Beautiful Struggle. I want to go to Morgan and not Howard. And he quotes his father as saying, "You are not going to 13th grade."
Woo. Yikes.
So now, so let's go through the chronology, and then we're going to get to Coates. So
just real quick, I just want to say very quickly that some of the voices we heard in that clip were Reginald Hudlin starting it off. We heard Elise McCutcheon. We heard Dwayne McDuffie. We heard my man Sundiata cha-jua. Yeah, I said Elise. Yeah. And I want to come back to the point that I want to come back to that. But go ahead, Todd. Go ahead, man.
Sure. We can get to all the points you want. I just want to do a quick chronology of everything and get to Coates. Because in Jungle Action, see, the interesting thing is that the white writer for Jungle Action really creates the whole universe of Wakanda that we're going to see in this movie. This guy, Don McGregor, a young white guy, was given Black Panther because they wanted to, Marvel was expanding, and Marvel had all these old titles that they had the copyright to, and one was Jungle Action, which was a reprint series of like Sheena and Khazar, these kind of Tarzan figures. And the white guy said, look, why can't we put Black Panther in Jungle Action? Not thinking about how disturbing that would be on a name level. And they said, go for it. So Marvel then basically gives the Black Panther to this one white writer, and this one white writer, McGregor, controls the character for the next 24 years or so. And he creates the ethnic divisions, the religious divisions. He creates all of that. So that was what the guy was, when the guy was talking about Jungle Action, when he saw Panther in Jungle Action. The wild thing about Jungle Action is the white guy got fired and the book got canceled because Marvel said he was too close to the Black experience. Only in America. Marvel was upset with him because he wouldn't include more white people in the book. And McGregor was like, it's in Africa. It's in a hidden country in Africa. There are no white people. And Marvel was mad because the white guy made the book too Black. Wow. And so they canceled it. And then Jack Kirby came in, the co-creator of the character, and he did these wild space adventures. And that's one of the things that one of the commentators was referring to. And then that got canceled. And then the character just kind of disappeared and was floating around in the Marvel universe till Christopher Priest was given the character, the first Black writer, and that was in 1998. So he takes it over. It becomes kind of political satire with a lot of white people involved because Milestone Comics had just died the year before, and Priest was afraid that his white audience couldn't handle a Black book. So he does a fantastic run, well-written run, but then Hudlin says, look, why can't he just be an uncompromised African? Why can't he just be an uncompromised Black man fighting against white supremacy? And so that's his run. Now, what Coates does is Coates goes into the internal issues of Wakanda, and he kind of takes from McGregor and says, I'm going to deal with Wakanda internally. And he tries to deal with the same contradictions of Black nationalism, of royalty rule and political rule, and nobody is pure. It's the same themes that he does in Between the World and Me, because my chapter on Coates compares Between the World and Me to his first Black Panther story. Wow.
And Netfa's over here about to hurt himself with conniptions in response to the idea that Ta-Nehisi Coates is handling the discussion and the of nationalism.
There's also something that can be very that I have to think of intellectually challenging to me, because I also feel like African people, we need to deal with our class struggle stuff internal, but at the same time, why come? Because it's still also the whole everything, all that is predicated on the outside. Maybe I'm getting too imperialist infrastructure of it all. So why has he got to come when we really finally have something that's challenging the whole, the paradigm, and can be digestible to people through this medium, and then bring it back to, I don't know.
You mean why is Coates bring it back to some
why
internal
focus
conflict?
on the internal stuff? Not that that's not people could argue, well, we have internal stuff that we need to deal with. I don't know how he deals with that. Does he really give? Because we don't have the.
Well, I mean, Todd, does he give the, as Cornel West was saying, does he give the neoliberal interpretation or analysis or approach to this conversation, to these internal struggles, or is it
the interviews I saw with him was he had to fix a lot of the broken toys of the character, meaning that the character had been through a lot and Wakanda had been through a lot by the time Coates got it. So when Coates got the book, it wasn't the same way when the other writers got the book. So he decided to go completely internal and say, let's do a story about whether monarchies should exist.
But Todd, real quick. I just want to be clear. But I'm asking on this question of this continuum from the white liberal creators, to what we would hope for some revolutionary depiction or analysis carried through this character. Where does Coates fit in on this continuum? That's what I'm asking you.
Well, I'll answer it this way. If you want the black revolutionary character, that's Reginald Hudlins. If you want the character that analyzes his own society and has to be forced to look at whether monarchies should exist, how much sexism is in the society, whether the people are growing and developing, that's what Coates does. Coates goes completely internal. So when he deals with the revolutionaries in his book who are trying to overthrow T'Challa, who are also black, he basically ends the first arc with a kind of almost C-SPAN discussion on how to build a nation. So what Coates would probably say is, I decided to do how would an African nation rebuild itself or build itself in the 21st century.
This is Dr. Haight. So this is a sovereign African nation that from the outset was unknown and didn't have a period of colonization, that is developed unimpeded in its technological and militaristic and economic superiority, that now has to undergo an internal revolution to overthrow the old ways of dynastic kingdom.
Wow.
Yes. What Coates says is that everything Wakanda is based on...
Marinate, though.
That's right.
That needs to marinate. What Haight just said needs to marinate. Let it breathe.
That's right. I mean,
he might need to repeat it.
Say it again.
Well, I'm just going to just run that back.
Yeah,
that's heavy.
So what Coates is trying to do, right, is, I'll say it a different way, to place upon an African sovereign nation that has never experienced colonization or a period of oppression from any external force, because it's an unknown African kingdom that has an unbroken dynastic line that also serves as its political governance.
Religious structure.
And religious structure. So Coates is then saying there needs to be a revolution to deal with the idea of the monarchy.
And the reason Coates does that is because by the time he gets the characters, Wakanda has already been invaded twice. So the people are then questioning their faith in their king and their faith in their government. And that's perfect for Coates because Coates is constantly dealing with the contradictions of African-American life, of Black nationalism, of Pan-Africanism. So with all the toys being broken and Wakanda being broken, that was the perfect environment for Coates and his philosophy to step in and say, now let's go completely internal.
But if West is correct of his neoliberal critique of Coates,
yes,
then what I'm hearing is, because when you're talking about what Hudlin had, the Panther, you're talking about that cartoon series.
Yeah, that's what I want.
Right?
Exactly.
In the cartoon series, now correct my bias here if necessary. The cartoon series had me very much in it wasn't that Wakanda was unknown, but it was known in its anti-imperial African sovereign stance.
Exactly.
Right.
Withstand the onslaught.
So when I hear what you're saying that Coates did with the character, it's walking away from the anti-imperial, again, to go back where West might have something to say here. it's walking away from any anti-imperial radical critique of the relationship between Africans and the rest of the world, or Europeans in particular, and couching it back safely, particularly for white affluent audiences that need to turn this into the big hit that Hollywood needs, safely for them to watch this internal discussion of Black people figuring out how to fix their own problems.
Well, let me try to answer that in as nuanced a way as possible. What Coates says in interviews about what he did was he said, look, I couldn't do what Hudlin did because the characters had changed, the environment had changed, Wakanda had been dealt with its first defeats. So I couldn't. I think the direct quote he says to the comics press is, Reginald Hudlin's character had him slapping fools. I couldn't have him slapping fools because by the time I got to the character, he had lost the connection to his people and he had lost the connection to Bast.
But wait a minute. Too quick. And then I'm gonna stop before I get here. But real quick. One. Well, let me start with the second one. One, you could say, as I understand the comic book universe, whenever someone takes over a character, they can reset things and reset stories and narratives and relationships any number of ways that they want. We got dead.
That's what Hudlin did. That's exactly what Hudlin did.
We got dead characters coming back to life under one writer and being dead under another writer. There's all kinds of things that can happen.
And what Coates would argue is by the time he got to the characters, there were things that had happened in the Marvel universe that he either couldn't reverse or he wouldn't reverse. Now, I don't remember, frankly.
The other thing, but the other part.
Hold on. Let me just finish the point.
The other thing that I'm hearing though is what he's really saying is I can't do what Hudlin did because Hudlin got that cartoon got crushed. Like it wasn't well received. It was unsupported. It was not commercially successful. And I think because of those politics. Anyway, now go ahead.
Well, I don't know in terms of how many people bought that cartoon. All I know is, here's all I know about the cartoon. The cartoon is a rewrite of the first story arc Hudlin did, and they added the whole backstory that Eric Jerome Dickey did with Storm and the Black Panther on the Black Panther's Walkabout. Right? Now, here are the two things I know about the cartoon. One, Hudlin had to do it himself. He took his own money. He took BET's resources. He called all his celebrity friends to do the voices, and he did the cartoon himself. The second thing I know about the cartoon is BET wouldn't air it for 3 years.
That's what I'm saying.
And he was working at BET.
I can't do what Hudlin did because I want my.
And BET wouldn't. It aired in Australia. It aired in Australia before it aired in America.
And that's why
the two things I can tell you about the cartoon.
Wait. That's why you said the Panther had to go on a walkabout because he was in Australia? He got real Aboriginal with his, my bad, Younger.
So I have a question.
Well, wait, I just want to make one more Coates point, and it's a point you'll want to hear. At some point in Coates' first arc, the Black Panther decides whether or not he should be a dictator. And he calls in all of the mythical Marvel dictatorships who are all white. And the Wakandans sit down with the white dictators, and they have a discussion. And the white dictators say to the Wakandans, "You're not ready for our politics because you think you're noble and untouched."
Wow.
So until you're ready to dirty your hands, we can't help you. Now, what Coates does in terms of his first arc is that he talks about that the nation is not important as much as the people is important. So he makes Shuri, a character who kind of died or was kind of in comic book limbo. Shuri comes back as like the ultimate griot, the ultimate Djali, who then represents the Wakandan people before they got the vibranium, before, all of the toys and the tech and all of that. And she represents the rebirth of the Wakandan people. And the people then decide to build a nation. And that nation is free of patriarchy, free of sexism, and free of the monarchy. And Coates does this because he wants to free the Black Panther from being a monarch, because he wants him to be a superhero with Storm and with some other black characters in a book called Black Panther and the Crew. But that book got canceled in 7 issues.
I don't know why he can't be a king and be part of that crew. And he just proved my point. He brought up a dead character and gave her new life.
I mean, that just sounds like the Chimurenga if I ever heard it. Shuri is like the comic book representation of the Chimurenga.
The Zimbabwe War of Resistance. So, I don't know. Maybe I'm too literal, looking for the literal.
There's no hesitation in hate. Please.
So what happened? Because you just brought up, because that was part of my question, the vibranium thing. To me, the resources and all that are the kind of the analogy, the analogous stuff to real life, and what really. I mean, I can't even imagine you talking about these white people coming and telling you you're not ready for us. We'll forego your resources because you're not ready to be. I mean, but what happened? You said you mentioned that at some point in the story that the Wakanda kind of deteriorates a little bit, the ruling and all that. So where does the resources, this vibranium and other things, fall into that? It seems like, so is the deterioration completely divorced from the encroachment of the outside forces? Is it just, what happens?
After Hudlin and before Coates, there were all sorts of stories that the Marvel Universe was connected in which all of their vibranium got taken from Doctor Doom and they had to destroy it before he took it. Wakanda got invaded by Thanos, who's going to be the villain in the upcoming Avengers movie that Black Panther will be in May. So, like, there were all sorts of things that happened when Black Panther was canceled. Because there was also a whole thing where Black Panther took over for Daredevil, but that's a whole nother story, and that's another white writer who significantly depowered the character. But there's all these things that happen outside of a Black Panther writer's reach. So when Coates got the toys, they were all broken. So what he decided to do was he decided to make new toys. He decided to make a new Wakanda, and he chose to use his own philosophies and his own approach to his politics, and he decided to infuse Wakanda with that kind of internal rebellion, which I guess represents the various, ideas of his own intellectual development. Because again, I do a whole chapter where I take Between the World and Me, and I quote that, and then I show where Black Panther reflects that.
I can't wait to read that. That's going to be deep right there.
So let me ask a real basic question right here. What is the origin of the word Wakanda?
That I do not know.
All right, so let's deal with that for a second.
Stumped it.
Because this is where they back themselves into a serious corner here. Because the language will give you an indication that it could be anywhere in Africa. But that if the language is real, then the people would be real, right? So Wakanda would be Kibantu. Like Kanda literally means race or blood in the Bakongo language. So now we get an instance where I think you were going with talking about the actual precious metals, minerals, the extractive industries through which countries would develop their wealth by raping Africa's minerals, in something like the Congo, or somewhere like the Congo, where you see the rape of coltan and the rape of the land and then the rape of the people. I mean, it's almost like the white writers know the white psyche really well. So the fact that they would rape the queen is something that African writers would never think about with Queen Elizabeth or any of those queens.
Wow.
Nobody's ever thinking about raping some old white woman like Queen Elizabeth. So even in the African writer series, like there's no revenge from Coates for the treatment of the Panther's own mother. Or if you think about it, there's no revenge in Malcolm's mind going after the hospital folks that took Malcolm's mother into the Kalamazoo State Hospital in Michigan. I mean, there's a lot of stuff happening around this time that I just keep wondering, was this stuff even funded by the CIA? Any connections around that?
That I do not know. I only know the surface history, and all I know is that Stanley and Jack Kirby were working class Jews who, again, to do the John Henry Clark thing. I mean, they knew history, they knew current events, And you know, many of these Jewish intellectuals pretend not to be Jewish intellectuals. So Stan Lee and Jack Kirby pretend to be these working class guys with high school diplomas, which is what they were. But they also had clearly bodies of knowledge that they pretended not to have. Because Stan Lee likes to joke about how when he and Steve Ditko created Doctor Strange, he got all these letters from people doing their doctoral dissertations on, you know, what they were reading and all of that. And Stan was like, oh, I just made all that stuff up, and I realized, I said, okay, that's, I'm not a psychologist, but I realized, okay, that's a defense mechanism to show that, no, you've done great reading of world popular culture and you've done great reading of mythology and world religion, and you're using it, but you're pretending that you're not using it. So when they create the character in 1966, what the scholar Alim Onama, and Jared, you remember him because you had him on your show years ago, what Nama says is that they just took from Lumumba.
Mm.
Now, what I say is that he goes, in terms of my book, what I say is that he goes from Lumumba to Sidney Poitier, under the black writers, to Nelson Mandela. That would be Priest, the black liberal. And then Hudlin takes him and tries to create an uncompromising African king. And then the character becomes Daredevil for almost no reason at all, except the white people want to keep him in a book, and his book got canceled. And then after he becomes a version of Daredevil, then Coates takes him and then does the internal between the world and me analysis. Now, what the filmmakers do is read what the filmmakers do is read all of that, and then decide that they want to take all of those characters and create a James Bond meets Godfather movie. So the Black Panther movie we're about to see is a reinvention of all of those characters in the James Bond / Godfather format.
So this would be one point I would want to raise, because there's this context that I think is important here, and I'm happy to be criticized in any number of ways for it. But when you bring up, because this is what I'm also getting from Neil Gabler's work here too, when you bring up the Jews that created Hollywood and largely this comic book industry, one of the points that Gabler makes about what they were doing that I think is important and relevant here is two things. One, they were trying to hide from the evils that they felt that they had, well, not that they felt, that they had suffered in Europe with the pogroms in Russia, and then, of course, eventually the Nazi Holocaust, among many other things. They wanted to hide, and so they created characters like Superman and others to hide their Jewishness. Many of them changed their names. They wrote Christmas carols. They created a Hollywood that not just that Jews were largely in control of, but that was satisfying the state. It wasn't just Jews creating it for Jews. It was to satisfy the political will and the cultural will of the state itself. So a lot of what they were doing in hiding was presenting an entertainment that would be satisfiable to a political and economic elite that was in part Jewish, but also largely Gentile, waspish and all that other stuff, but also wedded to the national will of the state project or the United States itself, defending the relationships at one point even with Hitler, all of the nonsense, and supporting many other for instance, red so-called anti-left politics, where Jews who were in support of those politics were pushed out of the industry and replaced or put in service of an anti-communist, anti-left, including anti-black industry. So before even getting to where Haight was going with this, as I understood him, with this connection to CIA interests and all that other stuff, there is a sort of an overt, understood institutional relationship between what Jews were doing for Hollywood and these comic books, and in the service to broader politics. But then there is also,
well, if I can answer that, I'm going to answer that very quickly and very succinctly. Stan Lee was born Stanley Lieber.
Right.
Jack Kirby was born Jacob Kutzenberg. Stan Lee was a Cold War liberal. Now, the comic book code comes after the other Jews created these comic books that were very graphic and very violent, but they also were very anti-racist. And so the comic book
from
code
a white
comes
liberal
and says,
perspective, though, we got to be clear on that. Anti-racist.
From a white liberal perspective, right? But the comic book code comes and says comic books can no longer be controversial. And so that's when DC brings back out their old characters from the 30s and 40s and updates them, Flash, et cetera, et cetera. And that's when they create Justice League, and Justice League makes a lot of money, and Stan Lee and the publisher of DC Comics are playing golf, and the publisher of DC is bragging about how much Justice League made. So Stan Lee comes back, creates the Fantastic Four, and then starts creating Marvel Comics, comics that reflect Stan Lee's Cold War liberal sentiments.
No question. So I was only trying to bring that out to point out that I'm because this is in part of my question, where I keep going back to what has Coates done with the character, because even now because part of the service of the state project, as I understand it, is to produce depictions of Black people that even where white liberals might feel like they're doing something progressive is actually reactionary or doing a disservice. So that's why I keep coming back to where is Coates in this continuum. But then I did also just want to point out that there is, even though I mentioned this institutional state relationship thing, there is this history, as I keep bringing out this book by Francis Stoner Saunders, The CIA in the World of Arts and Letters, The Cultural Cold War, where there has been a desire of the intelligence community to involve itself in entertainment, to put in messaging and associate or attune audiences in a certain political direction. So when I see these films, and I'm highly sensitive to what happens racially and in terms of politics, et cetera, I am a little bit aware of or concerned about what that might be saying. And even as we look at the continent of Africa today, what is this saying? And then as I want to make sure we get to, before we leave this conversation, what the sister Elise McClutchin, I think, was saying in that documentary, this question of, as a lot of people even brought up with Obama, why is the first Black president a continental African? Why is this first Black superhero, at this level at least, a continental African? And as a bunch of Pan-Africans sitting around having this conversation, what does that mean? And how should we react to even that question coming up? All right, I'm done. Go ahead. Anybody?
Well, let me just say this. The only way I can answer that question is to say that in terms of the book, I point out several times when mostly white writers depower Panther, and how the Black writers then take the character and re-empower him to the original Super Lumumba, if I may say, presentation in the Fantastic Four story that started it all. Coates is the first person, and again, I'm not stuck on Coates. I mean, Coates is another writer, but Coates decided as a Black writer that his idea toward Panther was to intellectually and culturally deconstruct Panther. Now, Hudlin would think, probably that was ridiculous, right? But McGregor would understand it, because McGregor put Panther in his own environment where he was constantly besieged by political and cultural differences, right? But this is the white writer who got fired for being too Black. Coates decides to make Panther a powerful person, but he does it by taking away all of the myths of Wakanda, the myth of superiority, the myth of our great technology making us superior. And he has, because he has a character in there who's a philosophy professor who makes the mistake of calling for revolution, and then his students believe him and they do the revolution, and then he goes, well, I didn't mean that. So Coates is enamored by contradiction, as we know by reading Between the World and Me. So he reflects that. So like where all the white writers and Black writers, it's a question of whether he's physically powerful. Coates asks, is the society mentally powerful? Is the society powerful enough to confront its own myths, its own history? And that's what Coates does. And you can argue that it's a brilliant internal study, or you can argue, as what many people would argue, is that you've once again depowered him. But not only have you depowered him, you've now depowered the entire society, because you wanted to rebuild it so that it looks like a modern society. And by the way, I want to say this. This would also include, having open LGBT characters in Panther, because the white writer had two characters in there quietly, where like if you didn't really understand what was going on, you wouldn't understand it. But Coates decided to attack all of these structures: patriarchy, sexual discrimination, the idea of monarchy, the idea of democracy. He decided to deal with all of Africa and African American contradictions in one shot, which again makes it a powerful piece of art. But I'm sure it would be popular to some and unpopular to others.
But I mean, it seems like it also, and I'm not that versed in it, but from your description, it seems like it also obscures the connections of those things, make it seem like they're inherently African, and that and that our internal contradictions are not connected to the global world and invasions and colonization and all those kind of things. Here's the point, like Dr. Haywater, like we're starting with a place that's never been colonized, and all of these things are rampantly the internal contradictions that are deteriorated in the thing. I mean, it's not even it just obscures to me the real issues that that we're dealing with, when he actually had a chance to even talk about, like, if you talk to me, I mean, the deterioration can be, and you said that, I can't remember, they had invaded, took the vibranium, all this kind of stuff. That's where neocolonialism starts. I mean, if you get somewhat, but then again, it has a different history because it's never been colonized. So that would be a very interesting thing to kind of recapture that kind of stuff. Have a revolution that embodies recapturing the legacy of, it's stand against imperialism, and even, because there's nothing about the original story that said that those contradictions, patriarchy and all that stuff, was strong inside the Wakanda. He's actually, it sounds like he's introducing it. Am I wrong? I mean, there's no...
And are all these other issues dealt with in the white characters? Like, are all these issues of patriarchy and LGBTQ and
because
well, I'll tell you who deals with it. I'll tell you who deals with it the most in the white writer camp, McGregor, because McGregor creates it.
But McGregor, I mean, in other characters, not with just the Panther character. Like, do these?
No, I'm not. That's what I'm saying. McGregor creates almost all of the Panther's supporting cast, or he uses the existing supporting cast, and he puts everybody in Wakanda, and he lets everybody fight it out. And he puts Panther in the center. Panther is a character who is besieged by conflict. Conflict is all around him, and it's his job to resolve the conflict. That's how the character is created. He's put in a swirl of conflict, and he has to resolve it. So McGregor deals with a lot of these issues in the 20 years in which he was basically solely responsible for the character. Now, there's some issues with McGregor because McGregor takes away the Panther's scientific brilliance, and he takes away all of the technology. So McGregor's Panther is a quite interesting study, but he's always getting beaten up. It takes him 4 pages to get out of a bear trap. Daredevil is blind. I say in the book, Daredevil is blind, is not a king, doesn't have money, but he can fight an army of ninjas in his comics, while the Black Panther takes 4 pages to get out of a bear trap.
Wow.
So Hudlin brings back the science and all that?
Hudlin and Priest bring the character back to the original Fantastic Four interpretation.
And that's why you can't... Go ahead.
So this is Dr. Burroughs. So let's get into this piece that Coates' approach may be more consistent with other African writers' critique of African society. Aikwe Armah, the great writer of 2000 Seasons, The Healers, Fragments, and then more recently, Eloquence of the Scribes. And Eloquence of the Scribes talks about this issue of monarchies and should people be able to rule based on blood lineage. And his position is no, that having blood lineage doesn't give you any right to say that you are qualified to lead a sovereign nation. So I could see if Coates was coming from that position, the same way Dhoruba bin Wahad was critiquing the great grandson of Nat Turner, Bruce Turner, by saying just because you were related to Nat Turner doesn't mean you're going to go out and form an army that's going to decapitate some crackers' heads. So now how do we deal with that from that position, that maybe in this dynastic line of rulership, we may be dealing with an intermediary period like we would have seen in ancient Kemetic dynasties, where the turbulence inside throws the dynasty off and disrupts the peace and order of what we knew before in the height of the civilization that had dynastic power?
That's a very deep question, and I really don't think I can answer it. I think that's above my pay grade to answer. I think you might have to read Coates.
That's what we're trying to do.
I think you might have to read Coates' first arc and write a journal article on that, and I'll help you with that, because I think that's a very important question to ask. Because again, you guys are really stuck on Coates. I mean, there are like 5 other writers that I've written about here. Coates wants to confront.
Hold up, though. You put him in the title, man. You put Coates.
I put him in the title because he's at the end, but I say from Stan Lee to Ta-Nehisi Coates. I don't think Stan Lee and Ta-Nehisi Coates.
Stan Lee's in everybody's movie. We got enough Stan Lee.
What's Coates?
Okay. I say from Stan Lee to Ta-Nehisi Coates, meaning I talk about other writers.
So we just gave room for all the other interviewers to get you later to ask people. That's fine.
All right, but let me get back to that. So what Coates is doing, what Coates is doing is talking about what should a 21st century African nation look like. And he deals with the weight of history through the Panther character and through all the other characters and the rebellions and things that happen in that book, and comes out of it with, we are now a 21st century African nation who is not depending on the past, including our own myths about ourselves. Because that's a big thing with Coates. Coates' thing in Between the World and Me, he talks about myths, and he refers to white people as the dreamers, and they're stuck in dreams, and that's why we can't deal. And he talks about the dreams of black nationalism and how that's faulty. So Coates is into that. So out of that first arc comes, we are now reformed and ready to face the future.
So where's his critique? Was this what you were asking earlier? Maybe I just didn't catch it. Where's his critique of white supremacy in this film then?
Well, that's part of the neoliberal struggle. My dear brother Ta-Nehisi doesn't seem to be able to capture the vantage point from his father, Mr. Paul Coates.
But I'm seeing that he's not even doing that in this. He's doing the reverse. He's doing, it sounds to me, Todd, that he's doing with his Panther what he doesn't do in his other work. He doesn't talk about the internal conflicts of the black nation for his popular work. He talks about white supremacy's impact on black people. So why?
Well, he talks about In Between the World and Me. He talks about In Between the World and Me that we cannot hang on to myths. And one of the myths we have is something called black nationalism. That black nationalism is as faulty a myth as white supremacy.
But does he say that like Huey Newton said that, or we need intercommunalism and something more revolutionary?
No, he doesn't. No, he doesn't say that, and that's why Cornel West's critique, I think, has a lot of merit. Because he doesn't say that. In fact, all he says in Between the World and Me, after dealing with all of our contradictions, all he says at the end of Between the World and Me is, well, son, I don't know what to do. We can't depend on God because I'm an atheist. We can't depend on black nationalism. So all you can do is the best you can do, and that's how the book ends. And that's why Cornel West, has such a public problem with Coates, because he said that's all you can do. It's kind of like Mary Frances Berry also said in a public forum. She said, don't read anything that says there's no hope. She says, I don't care how beautifully it's written. And that was clearly a dig at Coates. But again, there are other writers to deal with, folks. We got Jack Kirby talking about Afrofuturism in a very weird way. We have McGregor, like I said, struggling to create the society. There are many writers that I deal with in the book. Coates is near the end. And the book ends with the conclusion talking about how it was the black writers who basically created the character you saw in Captain America Civil War. And it's the black writers who are really responsible for this movie and this character being so popular, and it's going to be in a very popular movie. It's really thanks to Hudlin and Christopher Priest that we have this character being this cool and being seen as this cool because they did that, not the white writers.
Is Hudlin going to be happy with this movie?
I think Hudlin is already happy with this movie because he and Christopher Priest are basically responsible and laid the groundwork for this movie. So the fact that the Black Panther is being treated like James Bond is going to make Hudlin very happy.
I don't care about James Bond. That's the whole point. Are they going to see their Panther in this?
I think Hudlin cares about James Bond because his run of Panther acts like James Bond. He puts him in James Bond type situations. So I think Hudlin is going to be very happy. He's going to say, yeah, that's the character I wrote.
I hear you saying the exact opposite, but that's all right. Okay, I hear you say the exact opposite. I hear you saying that the Coates movie Panther and the Hudlin Panther are two different and going in two different directions. But
every Panther is different. The movie Panther is the culmination of all of the Panthers, but I'm saying it's the Black writer's reinterpretation of Panther that made him cool, like a kind of African Batman, right? Coates and Priest made him into like a cool African Batman. That's the character that the Marvel people went and put in Captain America Civil War. That is the Black people's character. That's all I'm saying. And the Black Panther movie stars the Black interpretation of the character. Now, Michael B. Jordan's character, Killmonger, that's a creation of McGregor. McGregor saw Killmonger as kind of a Che Guevara of Wakanda, who was against the royal house. And so Michael B. Jordan's character is created by McGregor.
So does that mean, wait, because when I hear the Che comparison, I'm hearing this, does that mean he's going to go spread the Wakandian revolution outside of Wakanda? That's what I hear.
Well, I don't know because I haven't seen the movie yet, but let me just say this. That may be because the movie is about an international conspiracy, I guess, to try to destroy Wakanda. So he may be. Absolutely.
Oh, this is fascinating. Now, Dr. Burroughs, can we go back for a second? Because I want to deal with Basset. Tell us about Basset.
You mean Bast?
Bast.
Wow.
Okay. Oh, deep. That's deep. Angela Bassett, Bast. Tell us about that.
So I'm assuming you want me to talk about Bass and not Angela Bassett. That's what I'm assuming, right?
Yes,
is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Interesting the whole thing with Bass because, again, I don't know what Stan Lee knew and what he didn't know, and Stan Lee would never tell you. But really from that first Black Panther story in Fantastic Four, they make it clear that they worship this panther. And so it's called the Panther God, and it's called that all the way up through when the Black writers take it over. And when the Black writers take it over, they say, look, why do we call him this the Panther God when it's really Bast? So Christopher Priest, the first Black writer, brings up the whole court of the ancestors because in the first Christopher Priest arc, he fights the devil and wins. And he fights the devil and wins because the devil wants his soul, and Panther says, well, you can take my soul, but you've got to take the whole souls of all of my ancestors. And the devil is transformed into the pantheon of all of his ancestors and says, now you must take all of us. And that's too much for the devil, so the devil gives up. That's the first Christopher Priest arc. So we get the idea of the kind of pavilion of Bast. Now, Hudlin takes it a step further and just creates Bast as a panther god who they have to go to. So when Storm and Black Panther get married, this is a Hudlin story. The ceremony is they go to the plane of the ancestors and they go and they talk to Bast, and Bast decides whether to approve the marriage or not.
And how does Bast appear?
Bast appears as a big panther. Now, Bast also plays a role in another Hudlin story where T'Challa is injured and Shuri, his sister, has to go be the panther, and she goes before Bast.
Is Bast gendered? Is Bast given gender as the big Black Panther?
Bast is not given gender. Bast is a big panther. Now, what's interesting about this, and you might find this really interesting, Bass is not portrayed as a Black Panther. Bass is portrayed as a White Panther. And he's done, and he's portrayed as that in Hudwin's run, which I thought was just very interesting. Like, because when I was reading it, I was like, okay, he's going straight all the way. But then I was like, this is interesting because for a character called the Black Panther, Bass seems kind of white, or at least clear colored. So I thought that was interesting.
Go ahead.
So the comedic Bass would be considered like a feminine goddess.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I was trying to get to was...
Would she ever been depicted as white or clear in the art?
No.
And again, there's no gender because it's just a big panther. There's no gender indication.
So, but because where I wanted to see was how do you have a feminine goddess and sexism at the same time? Like, so the differences with African religions is that you have deities that are depicted as women who have all the qualities of strength and everything that you could project onto a god-like character that would interrupt the ideas of sexism that you find if you look at the major European interpretations of African religions or Islam. Like Christianity and Islam play out their sexism through their religion. African traditions don't have that same kind of function with sexism. So I was wondering
it is not a religious scene, but there's a major scene in Priest Black Panther where Priest has the Black Panther slowly going out of control personally, and Storm has to stable him. So Storm serves as kind of an oracle for him to confess his sins to, and they embrace. And even her name is symbolic there because she's warning him of the ongoing storm or the oncoming storm if he doesn't get in control of himself. And it would take too long a discussion to explain why he's going out of control. But Priest told the story of the Panther's own mortality and what happens when you know how you're going to die and when you're going to die. How would you behave? And so Storm kind of serves as that African god, at least in that one scene. Storm kind of serves as that African goddess figure in the Priest run.
Yeah, we didn't tease it out. We didn't discuss everything you're going to talk about at the WPFW.
Oh, no, we haven't seen the movie. We'll have seen the movie.
Yeah, that's true. Oh, wow.
Yeah. And we'll only have about 30 minutes that night.
That's true, too.
So.
That'll be a complete different discussion. Can I ask everybody, why should people contribute to, we're in Fund Drive.
Yeah, go ahead.
So why should people contribute to WPFW? And during this, I think it's important to get a little pitch in there, maybe.
I mean, I always think it's important to the extent that WPFW serves Black, radical, struggling communities, that it should be supported. And it is the voice of the people, and all these oppressed groups, Black and others, can be heard. There are discussions that you can't hear anywhere else. I used to call it the liberated masses medium, and I think to the extent possible, that's as close as we get. And so anyway, it should definitely be supported. And who else would host the Hate Awards?
That's right.
And have an event like this.
And I think this level of discussion could only happen on Pacifica, and I think it being controlled by Africans for African abilities.
Stop! It can only happen on PFW. We got to be clear on that time.
No, wait a minute. No. Let me say what I was about to say. I said this kind of discussion could only happen on Pacifica. That's true. And what I was about to add was, before I got interrupted, but this level of discussion for African people, for African purposes, would only be on WPFW.
And if the Black Panther was going to give an interview, it would probably come out on WPFW.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Which brings up the question then, does the Black press serve a sovereign African people? Dr. Burroughs, as the expert on the Black press, has the Black press been put to use for recovering the sovereignty of African people?
Well, if we discuss the ideology of the Black press, which is what I've tried to start discussions on, the purposes of the Black press was to inform and connect and help to create a Black nation within a nation. At its best, that's what the Black press does. And although the Black press varies ideologically, when you look at people who have literally tried to do that, like the Negro World, some would say Muhammad Speaks in The Final Call, there are attempts for Black media to say, we are a nation within a nation, and we're going to provide information and ideas and have idea exchanges in order to build and maintain that nation. That's the Black press from that particular ideological strain. There are other ideological strains about it being the agent of the Black bourgeoisie and other things that are equally accurate. But the strain, the nationalist strain, has always played a role just by the very nature of the medium and the nature of the circumstances of the creation of the medium.
So then, does the Black press exist in Wakanda?
Did they deal with a Black press?
Reginald Hudlin, when Panther and Storm got married, Reginald Hudlin had doing the coverage of it. He had Touré and Ananda Lewis, believe it or not. They covered the wedding of the Black Panther in the comic.
He got
for BET.
He got he you know, 1 out of 2 ain't bad. You know. Well, man, look, man, I think we're gonna have to wrap it up here. Dr. Todd Steven Burroughs, go ahead, man.
Dr. Burroughs, this is just a personal question. Okay, what is it like to have studied and read and collected the action figures your entire life to be at this moment now with the hottest book on the Black Panther coming out?
Very strange, because I would love to go back to my high school self and explain to him that the people who are making fun of you right now for reading comics are going to have kids who are going to run and see all of these movies.
Yeah.
It's really strange to see your geek subculture as not only the main strain of popular culture, but now the top strain of popular culture. But if I can put on my media scholar hat for a second, you know, Disney is a master of controlling the world's imagination. So when they bought Marvel, they understood exactly what they were doing, because before Disney bought Marvel, Disney was the master of the young female imagination. They wanted boys, and they couldn't get boys. And they said, well, why don't we just buy Marvel Comics, and then we'll have everybody? And so they bought Marvel. Now, Marvel had a problem because Fox had leased out a lot of their characters, Fantastic Four, X-Men, Spider-Man. So how does Marvel and Disney solve that problem? Because they want to control the world's imagination. So they buy Fox. Disney owns Fox. So now Disney has complete control over Marvel's characters.
So, but see, this would be where I would want to ask the question I was getting at earlier. If
Sure.
The company that wants to control the world's imagination is producing and presenting us with the imagery and the symbolism that's supposed to be our revolutionary icon, what can we expect from this film? And what can we expect from the reaction that this film is going to create?
Well, I mean, the only comparison I can make is that, you know, I've been saying all week that this is a superhero version of Roots coming out with the way people have responded, right? And Roots had its own ideological problems, right? Roots was about the reaffirmation of the American idea.
That's right.
Right?
It's all good now.
Right.
We got that little issue cleared up. It's all gonna be good now.
Right. So if this is the superhero version of Roots, and Black Panther is going to be in a film 3 months later with all of the Avengers, I think we know how this film is going to end. This film is going to end with, okay,
oh my God.
Right. This film is going to end with, well, we had our problems, but now we solved them. And now it's time to go join the white world. Now, by the way, you know what's really interesting? When you look at the early reviews, white critics have written that they don't want that to happen. White critics have said, I really hope that this character doesn't, who've seen the movie, said, I really hope this character doesn't get diluted by the Avengers and doesn't, become this kind of sub thing, because I really like the Afrocentric focus of this movie.
Well, that's nonsense. They know better than that.
It's easy to say.
Yeah.
Sure, you say that now.
Right. I mean, you're right.
And that's after Black Panther's already disavowed African gods.
And then I would also want to say, because I think there was an article that just came out that that put the number at 16, that there are 16 Black Panther Party political prisoners still left in prison, alive right now, and at least one or several in exile. So is this going to lead to them being brought back or freed or yeah?
Well, Daruma bin Wahad's position is always that you free the Black political prisoners and that you send them to Wakanda with dual citizenship. But the sister's question was, why does Africa get the first superhero? As if Africa had a history before the U.S. That was a very, very powerful.
Well, my answer would be, I don't know the answer.
I didn't hear that.
I don't.
That's how I heard it.
I don't know the answer, but my answer would be this. I think Stanley and Jack Kirby were reading newspapers about African independence and decided that, okay, they already did their book on the civil rights movement, because remember, their book on the civil rights movement is X-Men.
Well,
so they had covered the civil rights movement from their perspective.
But
I think they said.
No, but
so
when you put black people in it, though, but Todd, when you put black people in it, this is where I didn't hear that. When you put black people in it and not couch it in an X-Men story, then you can only do it comfortably by bringing in the black people you're more comfortable with, which is the continental African and not
what I was going to say was
that's why Obama had the head start. And that's why this would be given the head start, because the white creators and supporters are more comfortable without the so-called Negro that they created and are scared
and not only that, I think
being seen as a revolutionary
What
leadership.
I remember her saying was not only was the African from the continent, but they weren't even dealing with the continent. They came here and were only dealing with, what was
as if
here.
black people here couldn't produce anything, because that's, of course, what white people here would be afraid of more than anything, that black people here would create a rebellion. And they're saying to the black people here, you can't do it. Your more original continental forebears might be able to do something. But because later in that same documentary, the very next piece they go into, if I remember correctly, is Luke Cage. And the comparison is Luke Cage is a hitman for hire, not really trying to be a superhero for some grand design, but it's like, well, I got these powers I fell into. I might as well sell them to people if they can.
Well, there are two interpretations. There are two interpretations of Luke Cage. You can take that interpretation, or you can take the interpretation of Luke Cage represents the political prisoner. Because see, when I read the scholarly literature on black comics, they pointed out that, look, people dog out Luke Cage, but let's look at Luke Cage. Luke Cage could be representative of the black revolutionary prisoner. Now, he may not be political, but he was unjustly accused. He went to jail. He got racist treatments by the prison authorities, and he got signed up for an experiment that might kill him. But instead of killing him, it liberated him. So Luke Cage is a very complicated character. But I do agree with the fact.
But then
but hold on, I'm not done yet. I do agree with the idea, though, that Luke Cage, it's not accidental that Marvel goes from Black Panther to then the Falcon, a sidekick to Captain America, to then Luke Cage, because Luke Cage is basically them walking out of Shaft and saying, let's do a character just like Shaft. And believe it or not, they even took the colors from Shaft, because when you look at Shaft, there's a scene where Shaft's in his office where he's wearing a yellow shirt and he's wearing blue pants. So they even took the color scheme out of Shaft and created Luke Cage quickly. So it's all about what the white imagination finds comfortable. You're right. They found it comfortable to have a Shaft superhero. Shaft was a private dick for hire. Luke Cage is a hero for hire. They thought that was cool. They thought that was innovative.
And then
they thought it was different.
And one of the things I think is because this is also the problem I have with the political prisoner, connection or whatever, is that it also political prisoners and our freedom fighters would not be looking at as our people as our internal contradictions, beating up the criminal and drugs. Of course, that's an issue, but then we have those issues for a reason. And how do we liberate? Yeah, working with the police to do it, and instead of really trying to transform our colonized minds,
Sure.
the reasons why that we engage kind of thing.
And they wouldn't be saying, like, Daruba didn't come out and say, like you can hire me and I might work for your freedom.
Sure.
But if you could afford my fee, he wasn't 18 meaning.
Right.
Like,
Sure.
You can find them and you can afford them. They might fight for your fee.
But neither was Shaft. Like Shaft wanted his money too.
But that's right. But all I'm saying is
and they stole it from Shaft. Right. So I'm just saying they stole it from Shaft. They weren't thinking any other level other than Shaft is cool. Let's steal from Shaft.
But
so that's what they did.
But be clear, my concern, and that's sort of what I was saying, because even I got caught up in the Netflix Luke Cage thing, in the excitement over it, and I enjoyed it. But the concern I have in terms of the reaction that it creates is, if these are revolutionary figures, then what is real revolution? And that's sort of my point. And that's why I was asking about what's happening with this Panther and the symbolism and all this excitement that even I feel. That what then happens, and I anyway, so what happens then with the symbolism if this white imagination, with the white control over our imagination, and these white controlled characters, even when rewritten in potentially a neoliberal frame, what does that mean symbolically for all of us?
And we know it's a neoliberal frame because let's remember, Ava DuVernay wanted to do Black Panther, but they didn't want her Daughters of the Dust type treatment.
Now Ava DuVernay is Daughters of the Dust?
Well, from the perspective of 2018, she wanted to do a film about Africa, and Marvel said no. We have a universe, an interlocking universe franchise. We don't want that deep African stuff. They told her that. That's how it got to Coogler. And Coogler was like, okay, Godfather and James Bond, I can do that.
This is going forever.
By the way, I told you about Coogler. I told you about Fruitvale. I have to say, I told you so. I was right about Fruitvale. I was right about all of that has happened since with Coogler, with Jordan. I called it all, and they've been proven. Look. Go ahead, man.
So Dr. Burroughs, tell us a little bit about the Afrofuturist aspects of Panther that we're going to see, because I just keep thinking, for folks who are trying to imagine what an African liberated sovereign country is going to look like, you can pull from different aspects and time periods of African history, but we have to deal with some aspect of now and technology and what this thing is going to look like, not just now, but 100 years, 200 years from now, some point in the future. What is the...
Well, if we're going with the comics, Wakanda always seems to be like 50 years ahead of everybody else, because in the first Fantastic Four story that introduces the Black Panther, he already has a kind of a Concorde jet that can take him around the world, but he also has a cell phone. This is in 1966. He basically has the equivalent of a cell phone. Now, when Christopher Priest came out with Black Panther in 1998, Panther already had an iPhone. That was in 98. So the technology is going to be decades ahead, 2, 3, 4 decades ahead, if they go with the comics.
Now, what is Wakanda's relationship with Black folks in the U.S. and the rest of the African continent? That's a small question.
Well, that is complicated because Wakanda is a xenophobic, if I have that pronounced correctly, nation. McGregor tried to talk about that because the Black Panther's girlfriend was a Black American, and he tried to talk about the African-American differences. There is really no direct connection between Wakanda as a nation and Black Americans, because Wakandans don't want anybody to be part of their nation other than Wakandans. The only thing that I remember from the early 70s that was kind of Pan-African was that when the Falcon came out originally, he could not fly. And it was the Black Panther who designed his wings. And they made a big deal about that in the comics in the 70s.
There was something in I think one of the article, your recent root article, I think that's what I read it, yeah, that said something about, which was really disturbing to me, that there was some, I guess it was a different story, parallel story, where the Wakanda made a deal, or the Imperialists got Wakanda to agree to not interfere, I guess, in the Imperials, or to sell out the rest.
That was a deep Hudlin story. Hudlin decided to tell the story of why was Wakanda never invaded, and the story he decided to tell was that, well, if we're going to be critical about what the deal was, Wakandans decided to say that as long as you don't touch us, you can do whatever you want to do to any other Africans, and we'll just not care. We'll just not pay attention to it.
It's like a Maroon story, like a real Maroon treaty.
And that's a story that Hudlin wrote, and it was quite powerful. I had mixed emotions about it, but I thought it was a bold story, and that was in the first ever Black Panther annual.
But it's honest.
Yeah.
I mean, it's honest. How else would a Wakanda survive on the continent now? I mean, how else would it? I mean, that
has also been the downfall. A lot of the was Nkrumah and all that.
And isn't that basically why Botswana has been left alone?
Right.
I mean, the deal with De Beers.
Yeah.
I mean, isn't that how it works now? I mean, that's.
But what about Storm? Isn't she out of Kenya or Kinyanga?
Yes, Storm is a person who has Kenyan and Black American heritage. Yes.
I thought she was.
And when she was first introduced in X-Men,
is Obama related to Storm?
When she was first introduced in X-Men, the people in Kenya,
the one easier on that one.
You mean Stormy Weather was about the coming of Obama? Melina Horn was singing Stormy Weather.
Yeah, how can you not vote for me? I'm in the X-Men. You know what I'm saying? My cousin is in the X-Men. You know what I'm saying?
Dreams of Malcolm X-Men. The audacity of hope and genetic mutation.
I'm going to have problems figuring out which clips of this to include in the show on Tuesday. But, wow.
I feel for you.
There's a lot of voices with vision. You gonna use X-ray or you gonna use Cyclops?
Oh my God.
Scott Summers or Malcolm X-ray? What you
just
gonna
be lazy and pick 20 minutes and just go. Dr. Burroughs, man, before any of us wrap up, and I'm not wrapping us up, but just before any of us wrap up, what more do we need to know about your book that we haven't covered so far, or that you want to leave the listeners to this discussion with?
Where can people get it?
And where can people get it?
People can get it on a certain website about a certain river. And that's all I know at this point. I don't know if you can get it directly from the publisher. That's a question I have to ask him. But the only other thing I want to say is that and this is very important, the foreword is written by Makani Themba.
Yes.
And the afterword is written by Greg Carr.
Yes. So when we will definitely repost with this the link to the conversation we had years ago with Makani Themba, one of our classics on Super Black and the history of Black
Super
comics.
Black. And I chose her because of that conversation. So thank you very much for that.
Well, you're welcome, I guess, again, whatever. No, that's great. She should be included for a number of reasons, including her pioneering work on the intersection of race, media, and activism.
Right.
And of course, Dr. Carr is all through I Mix What I Like as well. And we look forward to PFW. And we'll definitely look forward to reading that piece as well. Hey, man, congratulations, man. We always appreciate you and your work. And it's always good when someone in the crew is doing so well.
I just wanted to also thank you, Jared, for introducing me to my publisher, Kwasi Kanadu of Diasporic Africa Press.
So so we got to give the credit where credit is due for that as well, because Brother Kanadu and I come out of the Africana Studies and Research Center as it was constituted and constructed under Dr. James Turner. So all praise and respect due to Dr. Turner, to the Africana Studies and Research Center as it was constituted under his leadership. And I'm very happy that this connection could be made, and I'm proud of Brother Kanadu, man, putting this press together. Yeah, go ahead.
So
Todd, just one last question, man. If Disney bought Marvel, who bought Boyce Watkins? Oh, they broke it out. Wasn't it Maven? Maven Media. Maven Media bought Boyce Watkins. Oh, look, he's breaking furniture over that one. Breaking ground.
Gentlemen, it has been a pleasure, and I will have no discussion about Black Panther like this anywhere, and I really appreciate this level of discussion. Thank you so much.
Listen, thank you, man.
See you on the 17th.
Yeah, we'll see you on the 17th.
See you on the 17th.
I Mix What I Like. For more information, iMixWhatILike.org, at iMixWhatILike. Netfa Freeman's here, Voices with Vision.
Not for the politically faint of heart.
Never that. And you can check them out. When does your show air?
It's every Tuesday at 9 a.m. to 10 on WPFW 89.3 FM or WPFWFM.org.
All right, and we'll link to that as well. So, all right, everybody, thanks a lot, Dr. Haight, everybody, the whole crew. Peace, be willing to fight for it, as Fred Hampton used to say. We'll catch you in the whirlwind like Garvey. Peace. I mix what I like.